Hey guys, I'm at the Hoysaleswara temple in India, and here you can see a spectacular carving that debunks history. You can clearly see that this man is holding a telescope, and without a doubt, this is a telescope. It is cylindrical with a smaller end near the eyepiece and gradually becomes larger on the other side. The carving also shows he has one eye closed and the other eye open, typically how anyone looks through a telescope. And you can also see that the telescope is pointing up. This is shocking because all experts agree that this temple was created around 1120 AD, which is about 900 years ago. However, history books tell us that the telescope was invented much later in time, in 1608, which is just 400 years ago. So, how could a telescope be carved in a 900-year-old temple 500 years before the invention of telescope? This is a very good piece of evidence which proves that the ancient civilization of India used advanced technology. Every telescope needs at least 2 lenses. If they used telescopes, they would also have to manufacture lenses. Hence, glass manufacturing, grinding technology, and relevant tools must have also been used. And if they knew how to manufacture telescopes 900 years ago, they would have definitely used other machines as well. But this carving not only proves that telescopes were used 900 years ago, but shows that the telescope was used much earlier in time, thousands of years before this temple was even built. If you take a step back and look at the entire carving, it is not showing what happened between human beings 900 years ago, but it is depicting a war scene that happened much earlier in time between 2 types of gods. On the left side, you can see the gods called Devas, and on the right side, you can see the gods called Asuras. Now, we can see that these gods are portrayed with completely different facial features, helmets, and weapons. Ancient Indian texts clearly mention that these gods came down from the sky thousands of years ago and were equipped with advanced technology. These 2 races of gods are not only described in Hindu texts, but also described in another ancient religion called Zoroastrianism, which originated in ancient Iran, thousands of miles away from India. In Zoroastrian texts, the same gods are depicted with minor variations. The Devas are referred to as Devas in both these religions, and Asuras are referred to as Ahuras in Zoroastrianism. If these religious texts are merely imaginary stories, how could these 2 ancient religions separated by thousands of miles accurately portray these 2 races of gods? Is it possible that these gods were extraterrestrial beings who came down from the sky? The ancient Indian texts clearly mention that these gods came from other planets. For example, the Devas came from a planet called Devaloka. Today, we are able to land in Mars using a spacecraft. Did primitive human beings also witness these gods who came from other planets using vimanas or spacecrafts and used telescopes? How else can we explain this carving that shows a telescope 500 years before the modern invention? Is this why ancient Indian monuments show accurate portrayals of advanced machines? The brilliant monuments at Mahabalipuram, built 1300 years ago, show an accurate model of a stage rocket. The ancient Kailasa temple in Ellora caves shows a type of vimana similar to our modern-day jetpack. Why do we see this uncanny resemblance of our modern-day devices to ancient carvings? which were carved thousands of years ago? Is it possible that what we read today as mere religious books are really historical records of beings who came from other planets? It is one thing to use a telescope for observing stars and planets, but if you look at this carving, it is clear that this is a battlefield. We can see that the devas are all holding shields and weapons, and if you look at their legs, you can see they are perfectly aligned, showing their tactical formation. So why would anyone need a telescope in a battlefield? Let's look to the right and see if we can find the answer to this question. Here's their leader shown on a chariot. It's a shame that this sculpture was destroyed by foreign invaders, so we can't see all the details, but we can see that this deva is holding a rod-like device which releases multiple missiles into the air. Today, we use the same technology. We call this equipment as multiple rocket launchers, capable of releasing many rockets at once. Again, if you compare the carvings of these missiles to our modern-day missiles, they look identical. In fact, ancient Indian texts clearly mention that gods used weapons called astras, which were more advanced than what we even have today. Many experts claim that astras simply mean arrows. However, the astras shown here clearly prove that they are not arrows. Arrows have to be long and thin to travel. These are too thick to be arrows. These carvings don't have a pointed edge. They have a rounded head like a modern-day missile. To the right of the missiles, we can see the asuras. Of course, the actual space between these two armies has been cut off because there's no way to show the actual distance in a single carving. When we understand the magnitude of the weapons, we can understand why this deva is using a telescope. The gods were not fighting with swords and spears. They were using missiles and aerial attacks in the warfare. So a telescope would have been necessary to look up and see if any vimanas or astras are being deployed by the enemy. Now, what would have happened when primitive human beings witnessed the arrival of these gods and watched them use these advanced gadgets? Eventually, the gods would have taught human beings how to create and use devices like the telescope. They would have taught human beings how to read and write. This explains why ancient Indian texts show a remarkable understanding of astronomy. These books give many surprising details about various planets and stars, and modern-day experts are quite confused as to how primitive people could obtain this kind of information. The answer is this: the primitive people were no longer primitive after they met their gods. They were using telescopes to observe and record their findings. Now, you can go through pages and pages about the history of telescope, and we don't find anything about India. In Wikipedia, there is a detailed history of telescopes, but nothing about this carving. Why? Am I really the first person to find this carving? If a guy like me, who has spent just a few weeks looking at this temple and can find this information, there must have been many other historians and archaeologists who must have also noticed this carving. In fact, government archaeologists make a detailed note of each and every carving in these ancient temples. Why are they not telling the public that telescopes were used in India much earlier than 1608? If they do that, then they would have to agree that ancient India had a very advanced technology and vimanas and astras were not mere fiction. If they agree that telescopes were used in ancient times, they would also have to agree that other devices and machines were also used. In short, they would have to rewrite the history books. So they intentionally ignore these carvings to portray the ancient civilization as a primitive civilization. And this hiding of facts to fool us, to prevent us from learning the real history, is the very definition of conspiracy. Experts can try to hide this information, but I hope you can share this video with your friends, because even if you disagree with everything else I've said, this carving debunks the history that telescope was invented just 400 years ago. I'm Praveen Mohan. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.